Well, here we are, rivalry week coming up. Georgia Tech, Mississippi State. Everybody has a rival. Notre Dame, Southern Cal. It's kind of a rivalry. But you get on the internet and then you see all these talking heads talking about, oh, Boise State is going to get in over Tulane. Teams like that. BYU. There's all this argument about who's going to get in, and all they want to do is get in. They just want to make the playoff. There's 12 teams that'll get in, that'll get invited to make the playoff. But of all those 12, there's 3 at the most, that even have a real puncher's chance of winning the title. So as you go through this discourse of asking who can win the title, who's getting in, and all that, I really hate the way this sounds like college basketball, because that turned me off a long time ago. I don't want my favorite sport, college football, to turn into that mess. I just don't. Brackets. Bracketology in football. No, none of these, it doesn't matter. Invite whoever you want. Invite whoever you want, as long as you've got, at least don't leave out the best teams like you did last year. Then it might be a playoff worth watching, but there's 3 teams that can go all the way. They have what it takes to understand what you're asking them to do when they get to the playoffs. Even if you get a bye, you're going to have to win 2 to 3 games, aren't you? I forget. But you got to be a top 5, top 10 team back to back. These teams haven't played a top 10 team all year. None of these teams that they're screaming about and pointing out resumes and whatnot and this not. They haven't done all year what they got to do twice in a row, 3 times in a row. So as you are evaluating who's going to make the playoffs, let's think about who can win it. So when Tulane gets left out and Boise gets in instead, who cares? Both are going out the first chance they get. So will Penn State, Indiana. Invite them. They're going to be first round fodder. And every time you, for political or whatever reasons, bring in some team like a Boise or a Tulane or a Clemson or an SMU, all you're doing is making it easier for the real teams. And remember, for the last whatever years we have 4, you never even have 4 good teams to fill up the 4-team playoff. There's always one outsider who didn't belong. Did that change? Did NIL suddenly change that? No, it did not. So we've got to get through this, get this rival week out of the way and see who can survive, get the 12. And then what you're going to watch is a playoff that's not going to be very interesting until we get to the end. And a Georgia, maybe a Texas, and maybe Ohio State have the wherewithal to actually win back-to-back tough football games. Top 10 football games back-to-back. It's going to be a little easier because you're going to have to play a team that's called a top 5, and they're not. But if there's any top 5 teams in that playoff, somebody's going to have to beat one of them at least twice to win the title. So who can do that? And so as you're preparing your arguments and you're wailing about somebody didn't get in that should have, keep in mind what they're getting into. They're trying to get into a playoff, and they're going to have to win multiple games back-to-back, neutral fields, or maybe even one on the road against a very good football team, back to back. Indiana hasn't played but one good football team all year. Oregon's played 2. The list goes on and on. Everybody they're talking about has one real football game on their schedule. Some don't even have that. So all we can hope for is that at least the 2 or 3 of the best teams in the country actually get to play each other, and the referees don't decide the game in some blatant fashion that makes everybody really angry. Just be nice if we could just play the football games and not have politics and have predetermined outcomes already established, and the kind of games that nobody's proud of. Now, we had a lot of those this year. Miami basically was gifted 3 wins by the referees. Utah had a game stolen from them. We see it over and over. So, I mean, really, if we can just have a playoff where it's fairly reasonable that the teams that get the win actually won the game, I'd say we've made a great strides. Probably won't happen. Last year's playoff was a sham. Georgia wasn't in it. Everybody in Vegas says they would have beaten everybody in the field. Everybody knew it, and Georgia isn't quite as good this year. They're not as good as they were last year. Georgia, if they can find a way to get back to that level, will do the same thing this year. They're like 85% as good as they were in the last year, and the 2 years they won titles, they're really not quite that team at all. But their ceiling is very similar. Ohio State's got the talent to win it all. They got the depth. They can play the games back to back. Texas, same thing. And then who else? You tell me. Alabama, had they not thrown it away by losing to Oklahoma, would be in that caliber of teams that have the roster to survive the grind of a playoff. And that's kind of what we're getting down to, is you got to have the depth and the wherewithal to handle tough grind back to back to back. And it's got to be tough competition. And it's not something every team can do. So what does it matter if a Tulane gets left out? This is the time for the betters to have their moment. Right now, the Big Ten looks great. It looks like they got 5 of the best teams in the whole country. But everybody knows that's not true. Let them in the playoffs. Go ahead and invite the whole freaking Big Ten. Invite the whole Big 12. Invite the whole ACC. Let them double up. Let them pick teams from each other. And they still won't win the playoff. There's still only 3 good teams in the country, like it's been for a decade.